Hello everyone, welcome to week 16 of Montana's 69th legislative session. My name is Gabby Crevitt. I'm the communications director with the Montana Democratic Party.
And I'm Shannon O'Brien, former legislator, statewide candidate, and retired teacher.
Boy, Shannon, I can feel it. Sine die is in the air. It feels like we're nearing the end.
Wow, Gabby, yeah. This is really an intense moment in time. Every single legislative session. It's like mile 25 and a half of a 26.1 mile marathon. And the struggle now for most legislators is really the concept of making progress for Montanans over perfection. And legislators often want things to be just perfect, but therein lies the big issue. The big issue is who decides what's best. And so often compromises are made to make progress. And I'll say that folks are tired, they've been working hard, and this is where these intense decisions are made.
For sure. We'll get into all of that in a second, but just as a reminder, so of course the session is nearing its end, but I'd like to share with listeners that we're enjoying the podcast so much, we want to keep it going.
So our intentions at the Montana Democratic Party is to get Democrats elected. But not only that, it's engagement with especially our rural Montanans. And I think that there are a lot of folks out there who have democratic values. They want strong schools, they want a clean and healthful environment. They want to make sure that there's, justice and equity in the world, and are upset about what's happening, and they want to be a part. And this is one of our ways to reach folks, and we're getting great feedback. So stay tuned is what I have to say to our listeners, and we're going to continue this, and I think we'll have some great topics for you.
For sure. Thanks, Shannon. But back to this week. This week in the legislature, property taxes was the name of the game. We're definitely going to get into that as soon as possible. But Shannon, really quick, do you mind telling us a little bit about your interview after we chat?
Yeah, our guest today is Amanda Curtis, who is indeed a Montana powerhouse. Amanda serves currently as president of MFPE, which is Montana Federation of Public Employees. So think 20,000 people strong, all working for government, whether it's city, county, state, teachers, paraprofessionals, the list goes on. And we did have a focus on education because we haven't had that focus yet on education in our podcast. And so we've focused there. And Amanda is a former high school teacher in Butte, and she also has served in the legislature, and she ran for U.S. Senate. She is bright, she is articulate, and she is passionate. So it was a great interview.
Well, let's get into it. Shannon, it looks like we're one step closer to property tax relief. What's the update there?
Yeah, it looks to be like two bills that are still kind of in the works and being discussed. The primary bill I'm hearing the most discussion about is House Bill 231, which Lou Jones originally introduced, but it sounds like it's been heavily amended, in part by some real hardworking Democrats, namely Representative Jonathan Carlin and Representative Mark Thane, who introduced House Bill 155. So much of Democrat Mark Thane's bill is now a part of that 231. And I'm just going to explain kind of the basics. It's premature to know because, of course, it has to make it through both the House and the Senate, and any amendments that are made along the way need to go back to the House or the Senate to be approved. The amendments have to be approved as well. So basically, present law is for for homes that are under 1.5 million of assessed value, there's this rate of 1.35% of tax. And then it goes up to 1.9% if you have a house that's over 1.5 million. And now this bill breaks it down into different tiers. So if you have a $500,000 home or a $2 million home, you're going to pay different rates. For example, if you have a home that's worth 500,000 to 750,000, you're going to look at a 1.15% paid on your house. Now, if you own a home that's worth 2 million, you're going to pay upwards of 2.2%. So, and then there are various other rates in between those. There's actually, if you own a home that's $50,000 to 500,000, you'll pay 9.95%. So it all depends on the value of your home. So the big mansions, so to speak, will pay a much higher rate, which means they'll pay a significantly higher amount on their taxes. There'll be a one-time $400 credit. If this bill passes, I just have to continue to give that for Montanans on their tax bill for this year to kind of start things going. And then, just to give you a sense, if you live in Flathead County and you have a $600,000 home, you'll see about 30% reduction in your property tax bill. If you live in Yellowstone County and you have a $340,000 home, you'll see about a 30% reduction. In Glacier County, for example, if you have a $140,000 home, you could see upwards of 50% reduction in your property taxes. Now, one other factor is this homestead exemption. And those rates that I just talked about were people's primary home, so the home that they live in. And second homes, so if you have a house on Flathead Lake or if you have a small cabin up in the woods, you're going to look at some different rates for those homes. And which, basically will look like revenue neutral. And your rates shouldn't go up. Now, when we reduce property tax, we have to be increasing another tax unless we want to eliminate or decrease services to our constituents, right? Whether that's healthcare or education, whatever it might be. So there are tax shifts that will take place, and essentially large commercial taxes, so think big box stores, we'll see about 11.5%, which is a substantial increase. And then a statewide shift to what we call centrally assessed. Those are railroads or places that don't have property tax or don't have actual property. They will see about an 8%, could be 20% increase. I do want to point out with this bill that there'll be application processes and there'll be some challenges, not only for the Department of Revenue, but also for constituents. We saw a lot of folks, there was a tax rebate before, you had to apply for it. There was some confusion about that. You had to have your plot number. Most people don't have those. And so it was a lot of paperwork for folks. So it's really imperfect in many ways. But my sense is that's what has come through the House. So we'll see what happens. There's another bill, Senate Bill 542 by Wiley Galt, that's still in the mix, and we'll see what happens there. And that again is a tiered tax rate, and we have a homestead exemption on that bill. So it essentially freezes your taxes for a couple of years. It's very early to even be having these kind of conversations outside of the building, unless you want to stay active and communicate with your legislators. These are very complex bills, and so we'll see what comes out. We still have a week from Monday before the legislature sine dies. So we'll see what happens.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of moving pieces.
There are a lot of moving pieces, number one, and there's potential for operator error on my part, that I might not have all of these details exactly right because they're moving pieces or because these things are so complex. So I just want to give that caveat, that if I made an error in the bill as it stands as of today, my apologies.
Is there anything else beyond property taxes you wanted to chat about today?
Yeah, Gabby, there's right now is this time where a number of study bills have been introduced or are being introduced and are going through both the House and the Senate. Study bills, essentially, if they're passed, they require interim committees to study a certain topic. Today, for example, in the Senate heard a bill on a study for safe schools. One of the big issues in education right now is how do we make our schools safe? Last legislative session with Edie McClafferty, we had, I think the bill went through almost unanimously, to make sure that there was threat assessment protocol for schools, to make sure that there was a regular monthly meeting of people who were involved with the schools, law enforcement, whatnot, to see if there were any red flags with children or how to make our schools safe. So that's just an example of what's happening right now as well. One other thing I just want to point out that is interesting is we have what's called conference committees or free conference committees. So when the House passes a bill and an amendment that's amended that is not consistent with the Senate, and the Senate does not agree on that amendment, the House and Senate leadership create a conference committee. It's usually 3 House members and 3 Senate members, and they meet to discuss the amendment and come to an agreement on the amendment, and then it goes before the House and Senate again. If it's a free conference committee, that means they can discuss the whole bill. So keeping an eye on what happens during those free conference committees and the conference committees is really important work right now. And it's interesting that public testimony is not allowed during those conference committees, which is frustrating for many of us for transparency. And those conference committees can be pulled together in a matter of hours. So it's tough to even follow them sometimes. But it can be high impact for law.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to listening to your interview, which is coming up next.
Amanda Curtis, it is so lovely to have you on our podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's great to see you.
Thanks, Shannon. It's so nice to be here. I missed you, and I'm happy to see your face, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to just launch into some of these questions that I have for you. It's been quite a legislative session this 2025, and you've been a part of the legislature, watching it closely since your first session that you served in the House in 2013. I like to ask folks, what makes this legislative session unique, since everyone has its own personality? What do you think?
It's a really good question, and I'm never sure if I'm just learning more and seeing things that I hadn't seen in previous sessions, or if things have really changed. One thing I can say for certain is I think when I served in 2013 and I did those videos every day, and, I could be kind of snarky. Every once in a while, maybe something that I said could be interpreted as being mean or unkind, and I'd probably change my tone a little bit if I went back and did those over again. But we have, as a country, experienced a leader who has set the tone from the top that it is absolutely okay to just be mean. And I am shocked at the level of meanness that some legislators feel completely comfortable or even proud of showing to each other, to staff, to lobbyists, to the general public, on camera even, or one-on-one in the halls in the Capitol. It's not the majority, but it's sad to see that some folks have been elected by Montanans who just don't think that every other person that they interact with deserves basic human dignity.
That's really interesting. And I was in 2013, I was getting ready to work for Governor Bullock, and I listened to every single one of your updates. And I had never met you. And I was fascinated and so grateful because then you were a teacher and you gave a great education lens, but you also gave a rookie lens that was, I think, really helpful. And being a first year legislator, you see things with refreshing eyes, and thank you for doing that. I think it's really was really helpful for a lot of people.
Well, refreshing is a really nice way to say naive, and that's very kind of you.
You represent MFPE, which is 20,000 strong. And I did today for you, I'm wearing my great grandfather's AFL-CIO iron worker pins from 1938 and 1939. I'm so proud of them. And I treat them as though like they're, diamonds or eggshells or something like that because they're just so precious to me. I grew up in a union family and am a union member and grateful for your work. And so, one of the questions that I have for you is that the Montana legislature is consistently more right-wing, Republican dominated, and which traditionally is not always supportive of union bills. And I know we have a number of Republicans in the legislature who are union members, and more union members are Republicans. But the question I have for you is what, when these union buster bills are introduced, or these bills that are introduced to diminish the strength of the union and the support of workers, what is it, in your opinion, that kills these bills time and time and time again, every time they're introduced, every year?
Well, it's a really good question. And, MFPE, as you said, is this really professionally diverse and politically diverse group of public employees. Our members across the state range from far, far left to far, far right. And we have managed to come together and unite around our shared values. Every single session, we publish a scorecard. And when I first started in 2013, the Republican and Democrat scores, if you just look by party, were different, but not as drastically different as they are now. Our values haven't changed. The questions and the bills that we use as our guiding star are very similar to what they were in 2013. But I have to say it is true that when you look through the Democrat legislators, they've got, between a 97 and a 100% on our values. And in 2013, I'm sure that we had Republican legislators who scored, in the 80s, and down from there. I think last session, obviously we haven't done it yet for 2025. I think in the 23 session, the highest score a Republican earned was about a 67. But what we rely on is not that difference. Obviously, we rely on a working majority. We rely on Democrats who have always, or at least in recent times, supported labor and our shared values. and what I would consider and what many people call the true traditional Montana conservatives, not this new neo whatever brand of I don't even think they belong in the Republican Party, right? But the Republicans that you and I grew up with in Montana, in our churches and in our neighborhoods, who have traditional conservative values, and it is a traditional conservative value to value the work someone does and to believe that they should be paid fairly for it, and to believe that they should have a say in their working conditions. Montana and this nation have held those values for a long time.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough for the work that you do. For just the simplest concept of a fair living wage and a safe environment in which to work. And so thank you for that.
I think that there is a I know because we keep winning these bills, unions are the winningest in the Montana legislature. And I really have to say that the Democrats and true traditional conservative Republicans understand that workers are the economy, and that when union membership is strong, the economy is strong. And when union wages are strong, everybody's wages are stronger. And I just I wanted to take a second to tie union membership to the actual strength of the economy.
Um, so let's shift gears to education. And I want to point out to our listeners that Montana Federation of Public Employees, MFPE, is an organization that represents all public employees, not just teachers. But we have not had an expert on education policy on the podcast as a guest. And so I would like to, with your permission, Amanda, shift gears and talk a little bit about education and this legislative session. As mentioned earlier, Amanda's a former teacher and always a teacher. And I can hear that in some of your comments as well. So from your perspective, this legislative session, what are some of the big bills, the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to protecting and supporting our public education?
Well, education has been front and center in mostly good ways and a few bad ways. I have so much to say on this topic, so please just interrupt me, interject. I know you yourself are an education expert, so forgive me if I ramble here, but this is my jam. Uh, you probably remember when House Bill 15, which is always the inflationary increase for school funding, was a bargaining chip. We had a Democrat governor and a Republican House and Senate. And even though the bill kind of legally has to be passed every session, there was always this fight just to get it funded. It was always one of the last bargaining chips. And in this administration, I can give props that they have made passing the inflationary funding for schools a priority. And so it's good to see that. That is about $50 million in this biennium and about $170 million in the next biennium for public schools. Unfortunately, it does not even touch the huge inflationary gap that has been left by not keeping up with inflation over the last 5 or 6 or maybe even 10 years. So good work. You'll hear a common theme from me is it's not enough. We have this decennial study coming up, and the decennial study has been used as an excuse to kick the can down the road. Like, we'll just do a little drop in the bucket now, because in the decennial study, that's when we're really going to figure out how to fund public schools. And I hope that's true. I feel like we're told that every session. Obviously, everyone has been reading in the paper about House Bill 252, the STARS Act. The STARS Act is only $50 million over the biennium. Like, it's not this earth-shattering amount of money that's going to change public education. And it has strings attached to it that I think the sponsor and the supporters see as like a parachute and a safety net for schools. But for many of Montana's most rural and, I'm afraid, indigenous schools, those strings are going to end up strangling the district from being able to access the money. We are all committed across the state to working our hardest to meet the requirements in the STARS Act. I'm not convinced everyone's going to be able to access the money. And it's just not enough. Over in Missouri.
Let me just point out two things that you mentioned that some of our listeners may not know. The decennial study, every 10 years, we have a study, we as a state has a study to take a deeper dive look at our education and our education finance. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then I also just wanted to point out in that STARS Act, I think it's important for people to know that those strings attached that Amanda's referring to are a minimum salary for our first year teachers, the base salary. And sometimes school districts, especially the small ones, when you're asking them to increase a teacher salary from $3,000 or $32,000, which is too little, I'm not suggesting, but to upwards of 40 or more, that, where are they going to come up with that kind of money? So those are some of the strings that are attached that are of high concern.
Thanks so much for that, Shannon. Yeah, the money paid to the school is per educator. A small school doesn't have very many educators, so they're getting already, if they can access the money, are going to get a small amount. And you hit the nail on the head, there are many rural schools who pay $30,000 in starting teacher pay. And just this year, in the first year to access the money, starting teachers have to be up to about 42,000, and the amount of money coming from STARS could never get could never meet that requirement. So it's a I hate to call it an unfunded mandate because I don't want to be, accusatory or inflammatory, but it's going to be a heavy lift, and we're going to work really hard to get there.
And it might not be, and I feel like I've sound like a whiner because it is a significant, significant investment. What it could do is pull first year, second year teachers from those smaller districts instead of committing to those districts to the larger districts. And so give those districts that have the smaller populations, maybe only one or two or three teachers, more of a disadvantage other than just being rural. So, and that teacher shortage crisis is so real when you have upwards of approximately 10% per year teachers are leaving the profession. So there we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun to speak to another person who does school talk. Thank you for sharing this time with me. And like I said, we're committed. All of the members of MFPE across the state are committed to trying our best. $50 million is not that much money. Just the inflationary funding to try to keep up with the inflationary cost of paper is $50 million. So to allocate $50 million and act like it is this life-changing, earth-shattering bill, when it doesn't even address the fact that 10, 15, 20, 25-year teachers are having to work two jobs because they're getting priced out of their homes and can't afford to live in their communities. And it doesn't do anything for paraprofessionals. Really, one could argue that the best way to help teachers early or late in their career is to make sure that we have enough paraprofessionals to help us with all of the kids in our classrooms. And
Yep.
this legislature hasn't done anything for them.
So let's talk about keeping our public education public and our bolstering and supporting our public schools and some of the threats that are out there on that.
Well, I was really pleased to see that we sort of easily, by our standards, defeated a charter bill carried by Lee Deming. It was House Bill 320. And MFPE members and our allies, families, parents, grandparents across the state resoundingly said, this is not for Montana. This is not what we stand for. And the bill died fairly early on in the session. So that was good to see. We continue to see kind of the infiltration of our public education systems by privatizers. The Board of Public Education just hired a renowned private school. I don't know if entrepreneur is the right word. So there's a concerning trend, but the Montanans who elected the folks right across the street here at the Capitol did a good job of sending a working majority who recognize that the public schools in Montana are the foundation of our state and our economy and are so cherished.
So let's back up and just talk a little bit of the basics of the argument that we hear from some folks. If I pay my taxes, why can't I have some of that taxpayer dollar to go toward a private school if I want to send my child to a private school? What do you say to that?
Listen, from the time that we decided we were going to live in community with each other, we came up with a system where we would all pool a little bit of our earnings together so that we could have nice things like roads and bridges and schools and fire departments and hospitals, and to chip away at this basic fundamental agreement of shared community that we have made to each other since we started being neighbors is absolutely unacceptable and against the American dream.
And every dollar taken away from the public school just diminishes the
Yeah,
what we do.
90% of our kids are in public schools. And so you're going to take your 3,000 here and you're going to take your, 6,000 there. And it still costs the same amount to heat or light a classroom, whether you've got 28 kids in it or 26 kids in it. Um, I really want in my leadership position to focus on our common values and unity and really steer all of us away from this I have mine, you get yours mentality that we seem to be sliding into as a nation.
Yeah. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to share? Are there any changes going on, efforts that you're making with MFPE that you want to share?
Thank you. Our own MFPE member, Devo Powers, has managed to get a bill passed, House Bill 509, that expands the Educator Loan Assistance Program to more new teachers. And that should be a huge recruitment tool. I'm very proud of her for that. Um, Over in Missoula, Jonathan Carlin has managed to usher House Bill 168 all the way through the process, and that provides about $4 million of state funding a year so that 3 and 4-year-olds who are in special education services are able to receive state funding. That's a huge help for schools who need to be able to educate 3 and 4-year-olds with special needs, but were not previously receiving any state funding. Our own member, Melissa Romano, has had some amazing education bills this session. House Bill 551 eliminates the reduced price co-payments for school breakfasts and lunch. And, it might only be a reduction or a forgiveness of 50 cents or 70 cents per meal. But Melissa tells the story of having a student who just wasn't doing well and seemed off and couldn't find something in his backpack. And when she helped him, try to sort through his backpack, what she found was all stacks and stacks of bills from the school that were given to the student to take home, saying that they were overdue on their 70 cents per meal. It's just one of those, I'm so excited about her bill, and it's just heartwarming that we were able to come together to do something that really helps the neediest kids. Romano also passed a bill, House Bill 866, to allow us in special education to use the term emotional disability instead of being legally confined to this word emotional disturbance. doesn't cost any money and it's just nice. Romano also had House Bill 869 to prevent cardiac arrest events in student athletes by providing a small amount of money, about $120,000 just in the first 2 years for schools to be able to purchase and train coaches on using automatic external defibrillators. Well,
Good. Got it. You got it. These are great.
Our own member, Connie Keogh, was able to get House Bill 151 passed. It's less than $100,000 a year, and it funds schools to be able to hire sign language interpreters, which is a really big deal. Our own member, Eric Tilleman, was able to pass House Bill 357, which provides additional funding for middle school career and technical education programs. Melissa Nicholakakis was able to expand the current early literacy targeted intervention program to more students. This is the preschool that we're not allowed to call preschool. It's not preschool. And this is $2.5 million more per year for that program. Romano, again, further expanded that program to allow not just literacy, but numeracy to be measured when considering whether or not kids are eligible for the program. We killed some bad bills. I already talked about the voucher bill. We also killed a bill that would have harmed the educator conference, MFPE's educator conference, which is the best source of teacher-led professional development in the state. We beat back 2 union bills, and I'm proud of us and our members and our member legislators for bringing the bills, and then our members for having such a loud voice to help get them across the finish line. So thanks for letting me celebrate our little
Yeah.
victories.
Well, you are such a source of strength and support for legislators who are in there fighting the good fight. And at the time we're recording here, we have, I think today is, do you know offhand day, is it
I want to
80?
say 84, 85 maybe.
Yeah, so we're getting very close to sine die and or the adjourning completely, and it's been our public education is a 1/3 or so of our state budget, and that is not to be taken lightly. And one of my biases are the obviously public education and supporting teachers, but that kindergarten readiness and those bills that were passed to help allow for teachers to be able to teach. It's that simple, because when children enter and they're not kindergarten ready, that differentiation that happens, that some know their shapes and their colors and some don't, and some have a vocabulary and some have a minimal vocabulary, that gap just continues to widen typically, as you know. And so to see those early learning bills that I know you and I have been focused on and hoping for over a decade now, that we're finally getting up to speed. And so that's so hopeful. I can't thank you enough, Amanda, for your time and all of your energy and your expertise and your effort.
Thanks for saying that, Shannon. Thanks for everything you do and have done for Montana, and we'll continue to fight for kids, families, and schools together.
Sounds great. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.